You have been told that healing means becoming whole again, that brokenness must be fixed, glued back together, or hidden away in shame. But what if I told you that your shattered pieces are not a sign of defeat? What if those jagged edges, those cracks, those fragments everyone says you should discard are actually the sharpest tools you'll ever possess? What if your pain is not something to overcome, but something to weaponize? They lied to you. They told you that your trauma needs therapy, your anger needs management, your failures need to be forgotten. But here's the truth. Every scar on your soul is a lesson written in blood. Every wound you carry is proof that you survived what should have destroyed you. And instead of trying to become the person you were before you broke, you need to forge something new from the wreckage. Something harder, something unbreakable, something dangerous. This is not a message about recovery. This is about transformation. This is about looking at your broken pieces and asking a different question. Not, how do I fix this, but what can I build from this? Because the world doesn't need more people pretending to be healed. The world fears those who learned how to turn their pain into precision, their rage into strategy, their losses into weapons. If you've been through hell and came out the other side, this is for you. If you've been betrayed, abandoned, humiliated, and left for dead, this is for you. Because what they don't tell you is this. The broken ones, the scarred ones, the ones who learn to survive in the dark, they're the most dangerous. Not because they're cruel, but because they're immune. They can't be manipulated by fear because they've already lived through it. They can't be destroyed by loss because they've already lost everything. And they can't be controlled by hope because they stopped waiting for rescue and learned to save themselves. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take every wound, every failure, every moment of humiliation, and we're going to turn it into something lethal. Not in a violent way, but in a psychological, strategic, unstoppable way. By the end of this, you won't be looking for closure. You'll be looking for conquest. Because the moment you stop trying to heal and start learning to weaponize, you become something the world has never seen before. A survivor who refuses to stay a victim. Let's begin. Let's build an arsenal from the wreckage. You were taught that your pain is something to be ashamed of, something to hide, something that makes you weak. But pain is not weakness. Pain is data. It's information. It's a map of every place you were vulnerable, every moment you let your guard down, every person who exploited your trust. And now that you have that map, you know exactly where to fortify your mind. Think about it. Every betrayal taught you who not to trust. Every failure showed you what doesn't work. Every moment of loneliness forced you to become self-sufficient. The world broke you, yes, but in doing so it revealed its methods. It showed you how the game is played, and now you know the rules better than anyone who's never been broken. Most people go through life blindly trusting, naively believing that the world is fair, that people are good, that loyalty is real. But you know better. You've seen behind the curtain. You've watched people smile while they stabbed you in the back. You've heard promises that evaporated like mist. You've felt the weight of disappointment so many times that you stopped expecting anything from anyone. And that's not cynicism. That's clarity. Here's the first weapon you build from your broken pieces: expectation management. You stop being surprised by betrayal because you expect it. You stop being crushed by disappointment because you never built your hopes on unstable ground. You stop giving people the power to hurt you because you've already seen what they're capable of. And when you move through the world with that level of awareness, you become untouchable. People will call you cold. They'll say you've changed, that you're not the same person anymore. And they're right. You're not. You're sharper. You're smarter. You're no longer the naive version of yourself that walked into their traps. And that terrifies them because it means they can no longer use the same tactics on you. But here's the thing. You don't owe anyone your softness. You don't owe anyone your trust. You don't Owe anyone the version of yourself that existed before you were broken. That version is dead. And what rose from the ashes is something far more dangerous. A mind that sees the game, plays it better, and never apologizes for winning. This is the foundation. This is the first weapon. Now let's sharpen the blade. Your anger is not a flaw. Your rage is not something to suppress. It's fuel. It's energy. It's the fire that keeps you moving when everything else tells you to quit. The problem is, most people burn themselves with their own anger. They lash out, they scream, they self-destruct. But you're going to learn how to channel it. Anger is only destructive when it's uncontrolled. But when you harness it, when you direct it with precision, it becomes one of the most powerful forces in your arsenal. Think of every person who wronged you. Think of every moment you were disrespected, overlooked, underestimated. That burning feeling in your chest, that's not a problem. That's motivation. Every great achievement in history was fueled by someone who refused to accept their circumstances. Every empire, every revolution, every moment of change came from someone who was angry enough to do something about it. But the difference between those who succeeded and those who failed is simple: control. You don't scream, you strategize, you don't lash out, you execute. You don't let your anger make you reckless, you let it make you relentless. Because anger without direction is chaos. But anger with purpose, that's unstoppable. Here's how you weaponize it. Every time you feel that surge of rage, you pause. You don't react. You observe. You ask yourself, what is the most effective way to respond to this? Not the most emotional way, not the most satisfying way in the moment, the most effective way. And then you act with cold precision. Someone disrespects you. You don't argue. You remove them from your life without explanation. Someone underestimates you. You don't. Defend yourself. You prove them wrong in silence. Someone tries to manipulate you. You don't confront them. You outmaneuver them so smoothly they don't even realize they lost until it's too late. This is the second weapon, controlled rage. It's the difference between a wildfire and a forge. One destroys everything in its path. The other creates something unbreakable. Now let's talk about your failures. Every mistake you've made, every time you fell short, every moment you thought you weren't good enough. Most people see failure as the end. You see it as data, because every failure taught you something. Every mistake showed you a weakness. Every loss revealed a gap in your strategy. And now you know exactly what to fix. Here's the truth. People who never fail are people who never try. But people who fail repeatedly and keep going, those are the ones who eventually win. Because failure is not the opposite of success. Failure is the price of entry. It's the tuition you pay to learn. What works and what doesn't. Think about every time you failed. Did it kill you? No. Did it break you? Maybe. But you're still here. And that means you survived. And if you survived, you learned. And if you learned, you're stronger now than you were before. This is the third weapon, resilience through iteration. You don't fear failure anymore because you've already failed. You don't fear loss because you've already lost. And when you stop fearing the worst, you become capable of attempting the impossible. Most people play it safe because they're terrified of failure. But you've already been through the fire. You've already hit rock bottom. And now you know something they don't. The bottom is solid ground. You can build from there. You can push off from there. And once you realize that, there's nothing left to fear. This is where you start taking risks. Not reckless risks, but calculated ones. You start making moves that others wouldn't dare attempt because they're too afraid of what might happen if they fail. But you've already failed. You've already been humiliated. You've already been broken. And you survived. So what exactly do you have to lose? Nothing. And that makes you the most dangerous player in the room. But here's where it gets even deeper. Let's talk about your loneliness. Because if you've been through enough pain, chances are you've also been through isolation. Maybe people abandoned you, maybe you pushed them away, maybe you just realized that most relationships are transactional, conditional, temporary. And that realization left you alone. Most people fear loneliness. They'll do anything to avoid it. They'll stay in toxic relationships, surround themselves with fake friends, cling to anyone who gives them attention, all because the thought of being alone terrifies them. But you've been alone, and you're still here. Loneliness is not a curse. Loneliness is freedom, because when you're alone, you're not distracted, you're not diluted, you're not performing for anyone, you're just you. And in that solitude, you have the space to build something most people never do, a relationship with yourself. This is the fourth weapon, self-sufficiency. When you no longer need validation from others, you become immune to manipulation. When you no longer fear being alone, you stop tolerating people who don't add value to your life. When you stop needing anyone, you start choosing people based on merit, not desperation. And here's what happens next. People notice. They notice that you're not chasing them. They notice that you're not begging for attention. They notice that you're perfectly fine without them. And that shifts the dynamic entirely, because now they're the ones wondering why you don't need them. Now they're the ones trying to get your attention. Now they're the ones feeling the absence of your presence. This is power, not loud, aggressive power, quiet, magnetic power, the kind that doesn't demand respect, but commands it simply by existing. And it only happens when you stop needing anyone and start becoming someone. Now let's talk about your scars. The emotional ones, the psychological ones, the ones that no one sees but you feel every day. Most people try to hide their scars. They cover them up, pretend they don't exist, act like they're fine. But you're not going to do that. You're going to wear them like armor. Because here's the thing about scars. They're proof of survival. They're evidence that you went through something that should have destroyed you, but didn't. And that makes you credible. That makes you real. That makes you someone who can't be broken because you've already been through the process of breaking and rebuilding. People who've never been through pain don't understand resilience. They don't understand sacrifice. They don't understand what it takes to keep going when everything inside you is screaming to quit. But you do, and that gives you a depth, a gravity, a presence that others can feel even if they can't name it. This is the fifth weapon, authenticity through survival. You don't pretend to be perfect. You don't hide your past. You don't act like you've always had it together. You own your story, every ugly, painful, brutal part of it. And that ownership is what makes you untouchable, because when you own your story, no one can use it against you. When you admit your flaws, no one can expose you. When you embrace your darkness, no one can weaponize it. You've already done the work. You've already faced the worst parts of yourself, and now there's nothing left to hide. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to be perfect is the moment people start respecting you more. Because perfection is boring. Perfection is fake. Perfection is a mask. But scars are real. Scars are proof. Scars are the mark of someone who fought and won. So stop hiding them. Stop apologizing for them. Stop pretending they don't exist. Wear them proudly. Let people see that you've been through hell and came out the other side. Because that's not weakness. That's power. Now let's bring it all together. You've learned to weaponize your pain, your anger, your failures, your loneliness, and your scars. But there's one final piece, one final weapon that ties it all together, and that weapon is purpose. Because pain without purpose is just suffering. But pain with purpose, that's transformation. That's evolution. That's the difference between someone who stays broken and someone who becomes bulletproof. So here's the question. What are you building? What are you working toward? What is the vision that makes all this pain worth it? Because if you don't have a purpose, all these weapons are meaningless. But if you do have a purpose, if you have a mission, if you have a goal that's bigger than your pain, then everything changes. Your pain becomes fuel. Your anger becomes focus. Your failures become lessons. Your loneliness becomes clarity. Your scars become proof. And suddenly, you're not just surviving, you're conquering. This is the final weapon, purpose-driven intensity. When you have a purpose, nothing can stop you. Betrayal can't stop you because your mission is bigger than any relationship. Failure can't stop you because every setback is just a data point. Pain can't stop you because it's just fuel for the fire. And here's what happens when you operate from this place. People start to notice. They notice that you're different. They notice that you're not playing the same game anymore. They notice that you're not distracted by the same things that distract everyone else. And they either respect you or fear you, usually both, because you're no longer someone who reacts. You're someone who executes. You're no longer someone who waits for permission. You're someone who takes what's yours. You're no longer someone who hopes for change. You're someone who creates it. And that's terrifying to people who are still stuck in the old paradigm. People who are still waiting to be saved, still hoping for fairness, still believing that the world owes them something. But you know better. You know that the world doesn't owe you anything. And that's exactly why you're going to take everything you want. This is the culmination. This is the moment where all your broken pieces have been forged into something unstoppable. You're no longer the person who got hurt. You're the person who learned from it. You're no longer the person who failed. You're the person who used that failure as a stepping stone. You're no longer the person who was broken. You're the person who built weapons from the wreckage. So what do you do now? You move forward. You execute. You build. You conquer. You stop asking for permission and start taking action. You stop waiting for the right moment and start creating it. You stop hoping for change and start becoming the change. Because here's the final truth. The world doesn't fear the person who was never broken. The world fears the person who was shattered into 1,000 pieces and then rebuilt themselves into something stronger, sharper, and more dangerous than before. That person is you. And now that you know how to build weapons from your broken pieces, there's nothing left to stop you. Not pain, not fear, not failure, not betrayal, nothing, because you've already survived the worst. And now you're going to thrive. This is not the end. This is the beginning of a new chapter where you're no longer the victim. You're the architect, you're the strategist, you're the force that reshapes reality according to your will. And anyone who stands in your way will learn very quickly that you're not someone to be trifled with. Because you didn't just survive, you evolved, and evolution is irreversible. Now go, build your arsenal, forge your weapons, and show the world what happens when someone refuses to stay broken.